Uh, you are very welcome to this webinar tonight. This is called Supporting Speech, Language and Communication in the Classroom. I'm Olive Buckeridge. I'm a speech and language therapist. I'm also the early years specialist in Down Syndrome Ireland. I'm very glad you're here, and I hope this will be useful to you. Okay, we'll just get started. Okay, so this is supporting speech and language in the classroom. Obviously, it's very important to support anybody with Down syndrome in the classroom. And oftentimes it can be difficult, and a lot of teachers or SNAs would ask, are there any resources or particular things that cause difficulty or can be of help or would support the child during the day? So I hope you can see everything okay. I'm just going to pop that up on the screen, and if you have any issues, let me know. Okay, so we are going to talk about working in the classroom with children with Down syndrome. And I suppose the most important thing for me is to point out the learning profile of children with Down syndrome. This is something that is so important to understand and to grasp, I suppose, as you are working with a child with Down syndrome. They have exceptional strengths in certain areas, and that's really important to focus on. It's also so positive when you are working with children with Down syndrome and with their families as well, and to acknowledge that they do have very strong visual awareness and visual learning skills. Their ability to learn and to use the written word is also excellent, and we know from the research that children from about 2.5 can identify the written word and use it successfully. And they can identify maybe not the word to read it, but they can recognize the length of the word, maybe the form or the structure of the word. We also know that one of the strengths of their learning profile is their ability to learn and to use the written word. I just said that already, but their ability to model or copy behaviors. So if you're ever signing to a child, you might see them imitating the sign back, or if you're using a gesture, they often copy that, or they can copy a lot of your behaviors as well, perhaps a stance, your facial expressions. And this is an excellent thing because it shows that they can imitate and copy and learn from their peers and adults as well. Again, practical materials are really important, and we use an awful lot of materials. You know, you'll see speech therapists or me going out with my cards from the See and Learn pack, or you know, my first counting materials, or the higher level language cards as we go forward, because they're visual and it allows the child to remember the word using the visual. Hands-on activities are really important as well. The more you can repeat an activity and you can use materials that can really access the visual memory, that is brilliant. The more you can demo something as well in different ways is really important. And teachers do that all of the time anyways. Very much so, children and students with the Down syndrome are very keen to communicate. They want to know what's going on. They want to be involved in any group activity. And I mean this generally speaking. It doesn't happen every day. Every child experiences dips in their emotions or moods, but in the main, they're generally happy to communicate and socialize with others. So we really need to maximize that skill. The other really important thing as well is to note that they're really good to pick up on emotional cues and signals, and very keen to also follow the emotional cues and signals as well. So if I'm sometimes a bit sad or I'm really happy with something, they know that that means that it's either good or they might need to just wait a second. And they can really read the room or read a change in mood as well. The big thing though is learning and using visual supports. My hands are my visual supports. I use them a lot to signpost what I'm going to do next. So first we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. Are we going to work first, or are we going to wait, or is it time to eat for lunch? You know, I'm using my hands as a visual support all of the time. I sign some of the time, a lot of the time. And I also use a lot of speech signing too, to cue the child in to watch my mouth. Again, if you don't have love and you are just basically using gestures to communicate, that's absolutely fine. You know, make sure you provide some other sort of information to the child. It's really important that they're looking at our mouths though, that they're watching the lip movement, they're watching the formation of the word, and they're also following the sign. But the big thing is that they learn through repetition. And so often when I'm talking to teachers, they will say things like, how, when will I have that done for Olive? Or how soon does that need to be done? And so that's really important to be aware that repetition is the key in learning. It just depends on when the child gets there. They'll get there when they get there. And that's really important to remember as well. There are areas, obviously, for children with Down syndrome that need to be developed. And part of Down syndrome is that that syndrome does have issues with speech and language. Children can present with differing levels of difficulty with speech and language. Now, there are reasons for that, there is the genetic component and there are environmental factors that can contribute to that. Working memory is huge. Again, the retention of information, you could spend all of a term working on something, and then you come to term two, and the child appears to have forgotten it. It's more around the retention of the information, being able to store and retrieve that information. We hear a lot of speech therapists that the phonological loop, being able to store the sound and then retrieve it and produce it, that requires a great deal of working memory, which can be affected with the child or student with Down syndrome. So please remember that when you are working on materials. Again, repetition is important. How we provide that information. Is it concrete? Is there a lot of visual support with the information as well? Now, concentration. We say it kind of flippantly sometimes about, concentration is an area sometimes of concern. And even professionals like myself who've been working in this area for years and years sometimes miss it. And concentration, how do you know a child is concentrating? If they're sitting and listening. But are we really looking at the body? Are we really taking in the factors? And I'm just going to tell you a really quick story that happened to me when I was working with a child. And afterwards, another professional indicated to me that they actually hadn't listened to anything that I was saying, and I was quite taken aback. And I thought, oh my goodness, what do you mean? And she said, did you watch the child rocking a little bit while you were talking? Did you see them kind of tilting from side to side and then drawing their legs up towards them? And I said, to be honest, I was so focused on getting the sounds out or, doing the language piece that I really didn't. And she said, to be honest, if a child is moving like that, they are trying to find a core position for themselves. They are trying to find a place where they're comfortable. And so if they are moving a lot, they're not really concentrating because their whole area of energy or their energies are going into maintaining a position. So if you do see that tilting forward or back, or kind of putting their hands on the table to rest themselves on, they're really working to stabilize themselves. So just that can be even for an SNA. Watching that a little bit could just be a postural adjustment, a quick brain break, just a really quick brain break, a quick shuffle, and back to work again, or reducing the amount of time we're spending sitting and then change the activity quickly. But just watch for those signs, and it's never left me. It's all stuck with me. Fine and gross motor skill can also be an issue too, where there could be issues with holding a pencil because of weak shoulder muscles, the elbow or the wrist, and linking in with an occupational therapist if you can access one, or if you have access to information left by on a report, make sure you access that to see around positioning for handwriting. Also, the gross motor movement is important. I've alluded to that with the core muscles. That's really important as well as an area to develop. Vision and hearing overall is a problem. And this is something that isn't talked about enough or really taken into account. 80% of children with Down syndrome will experience hearing loss at some point. 6%, 6 to 12% of that 80% will actually experience a sensory neural hearing loss, where it's actually the inner ear is affected, the actual organ of hearing is affected. The majority of children will present, or students will present, with conductive hearing loss, where the middle ear, which is supposed to be air-filled, becomes fluid-filled with that glue ear, the name glue ear or otitis media. And can you imagine if you're listening to something and your ear has now been filled with this gluey type of liquid or gunk? It's really difficult to hear the sounds coming in. That affects the volume, the quality of the sound also. So can you imagine trying to listen to something that's very much verbal in the classroom without any signing support or any visual support? And the child is relying on that, on their ears only, and they may have a conductive hearing loss. So please be very aware of that. The percentage is very, very high. Um, there is a very good document called that has just been released by the Down Syndrome Medical Interest Group on hearing issues, and it gives you guidelines on when it's appropriate for parents to, bring in hearing aids or use a Baha band, or the surgical route. But it just defines how much of an impact hearing does have on the child. And we talk about concentration. Imagine not being able to hear something well, then it can be very difficult to concentrate. If I couldn't hear something, I'd find it very hard to concentrate. I find it very frustrating as well. So it's very important to watch out, or to really know about the child you're working with, particularly about hearing. Children may not always wear their hearing aids as well, because this can be quite a periodic or episodic event. It tends to flare up more in the winter when children are very congested. And if a child is very congested, it can affect the hearing as well. The ear canals are very small. There can be wax issues too. So please be aware that hearing, again, can have an impact on the acquisition of sound and the production of sound, and also the other things that are very important, like your attention and your listening to. Vision, again, about 75% of children with Down syndrome do experience some sort of visual issues. A lot of children do have long-sightedness. They have focusing issues as well, where they may need support with glasses, and also in terms of using a particular font, like an 18 plus font on the page, making sure that they can see the lines on the page, and also that you're not using photocopies of photocopies. When we are doing our reading, or like language to reading, this would be the size of the font that we would use. Again, making sure a child who is supposed to be wearing their glasses attempts to wear the glasses. There can be issues with actually wearing them. They can be quite annoying, but building up, I suppose, the resistance, building up the skill to hold on to the glasses and to keep them on is important. I hate the word compliance, but that they would just start to wear them a little bit more. Medical, sleep, and behavioral issues are also quite an important thing to be aware of if you have a student with Down syndrome in your classroom. The medical issues, or the medical problems that some children encounter, can be minimal, and then there can be more complex. Children can experience GI problems, gastrointestinal problems, whereby they would have motility issues, so constipation can be a factor, and being uncomfortable and unable to deal with bowel movements or things like that can be really hard for a child. So they're often managed by by a clinical team, and they may need medication, and at times they might be really uncomfortable as well. So that's important to be aware of. Children can also have thyroid issues, where they're presenting with fatigue, tiredness, lack of concentration. And it's good to convey this back to parents, because then they can go to their clinical nurse or to their GP, and this can be almost like a red flag for investigation of thyroid. And thyroid can flare up quite quickly, even if bloods have been taken a few weeks prior. It can happen quite quickly after bloods are taken. So sometimes parents might say, "Oh, well, the bloods were just done a few weeks ago." It can happen again quite quickly. If anybody wants to find out further information about those clinical issues, there are, again, lots of information on the Down Syndrome Medical Interest Group, where they have information on that if you go to the website. Again, medical could be issues with feeding as well. A child might be aspirating, or they might have a peg feed or something like that. So just be aware around the factors that could affect the child with any medical complication, fatigue being one of them generally. Now, sleep is another area that is, I suppose, the under sixes are investigated quite quickly around sleep, where sleep apnea could be a factor, where the child could have enlarged tonsils or adenoids, and they might be having difficulty breathing during the night, and that affects their sleep and affects their daily activities as well. So again, making sure you check in with mom or dad or the caregiver to see how was your night's sleep, because oftentimes it can be up and down for the night, in and out of mom and dad's bed. And the old adage of, well, if the child isn't sleeping, no one in the house is sleeping. And this can lead to, if you don't establish a good sleep routine at the beginning, as Fiona McGreen, the clinical nurse manager, would say, you're going down the line of when a child wakes up, they're looking for their parents, and then it can be very hard to get them back to sleep. Behavioral issues or issues of concern can occur from a combination of all of those things. Being frustrated, not being understood, not being heard, not being able to hear properly, not maybe being able to focus on time when you're looking at something, having core muscle issues which are impacting your ability to sit comfortably. All of those things can affect somebody's day in school. So it's really important to remember that. Tonight, I'm just going to talk to you about some interventions and programs and resources that we would use in the classroom, or we would use a speech therapist to support children with Down syndrome. This list is not a definitive list by any manner or means. There are so many different resources out there. These are just some of the ones that I would use and I have found useful in my working day when I'm in a school with children. Colourful semantics. A lot of you have come across colourful semantics, and a lot of the CDNTs are now using these with children. So if you are getting resources back from the clinic, it can often be colourful semantics. And these are used to really, I suppose you can see there, develop and consolidate the understanding of WH questions, and also to support the production of nice sentences. Also, if you understand the WH questions, it's very easy then to produce the questions or to produce the sentences. It's based on color, obviously, and you'll see that the interrogatives or the WHs are represented by different colors. So we have the orange word is for who, the yellow word is for what doing. Now, Alison Bryan, who invented this or developed or designed this program, would always say that yellow, or the action word, the what doing word, is the anchor of the sentence. And that when we're introducing the anchor of the sentence, we should do it with a mantra. Yellow is what doing. What doing? Yellow is what doing. So the child is linking the color to the action word. It's good to start with the action word as well, again, because it does anchor the sentence. Now, doing this depends on the number of words the child has, their understanding of maybe the subject of the sentence, like who, do they have enough vocabulary to do this? And I suppose we do need a good deal of vocabulary to use colourful semantics. The green words tell us what, and the blue words tell us where. So I usually start off with those four colours because you have your who, which would always be the subject of your sentence. You have your what doing, which is the verb. You have your green, which is the what, would often be the object of the sentence, and the where would be the adjective of the or the prepositional phrase. I beg your pardon. And you can see it becomes quite complex, and you can use different symbols to indicate different structures in the sentence as well. Here is a written sentence that has been color coded. We're using a picture. The baby is eating the birthday cake in the garden. So when we were doing it, we would say, oh, what doing is eating. Orange is who is eating, the baby is eating. Green is what, and blue is in the garden. Now, this is a very quick overview of colourful semantics. There is so much to do when you're introducing pictures. You have to provide cues, you have to repeat it, you have to really support the child when you're doing it. I'm just showing you the literacy aspect of it there. I will send these slides on to you as well, and you will see here we have the colour coding written out here for you, so you can see where the colour is in relation to the sentence. So this is what a color-coded strip is like. And again, I would always start with the yellow as per Alison Bryan's instructions, the what doing. But when I'm using this, I would always provide two pictures so the child has a choice. So if I was doing something like the baby is eating birthday cake in the garden, I would have a picture of eating and kicking, and I would say, oh, what doing? Eating, kicking. Eating. The baby is eating. That's right. Who is eating? Orange is who? Let's look who it is. You're talking about the baby eating in the garden, and you again provide two cues, the baby or a dog. Oh, show me who is eating. Is it baby? Is it dog? Or dog, baby? And they identified the correct or the target word. And so on for the rest of the colours as well. And then when you have filled in your color-coded strip, you would read the sentence together. Again, what doing? Eating. Who is eating? The baby. What is the baby eating? Green. What green is for what? Birthday cake. Where is the baby eating in the garden? I would also sign this as well after I have produced the sentence. There are quite a lot of instructions around what you do with the who, the what, the where, the when, and all of this. But when you're using the who, it's generally to show it's people, occupations, characters. We only use animals when they're characters. So I would use this for the gingerbread man story. It's a really nice one to use. And then we use the animals for the what. What is it? So what doing, that's my favorite color because it's the first one I always do. And these are your action words, your action verbs, the running, the crying, the eating, the sleeping, the washing, the walking, all of those ones. And we can also use the is or the auxiliary verb or the copula as it's called, the is, was, had, or had. And we can introduce nice grammatical elements. Obviously, the child would have to have a fairly decent vocabulary to do this for these productions. If the child has less than 250 words, working on phrases like the dog is eating can be tricky because they may not have enough vocabulary to generate an expressive grammatical system. So here you see again more illiteracy based. If you were trying to bring in the sight words and trying to bring it into reading and trying to integrate colorful semantics as well, you have it here. Yellow is what doing, is climbing. Orange is who is climbing, the girl. And then you see the copula there is an is on its own. It's like a verb on its own. The girl is climbing, and that's indicate that is represented by a diamond. The what, objects and animals. What is that? It's a cow. Um, what is the girl kicking the ball? So if I was doing that, I would say, okay, let's start the sentence. Yellow is what doing? What doing? And then they have their choice of pictures again. Or if you're doing the written word or the sight words, whatever you're doing, you would offer choice always. Remember, you're setting a child up for success and you're making sure that they always get where they need to go and they always achieve a positive outcome. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about errorless learning. So that's the what color, the green, and the where is the blue, where, and the sign as well is useful. And here you're seeing that there's a lengthening of this of the sentence here. The baby is eating pasta in the kitchen. And again, you go through it mantra-wise over and over again. Remember that positive profile, that lovely learning profile of children with Down syndrome. Repetition is key. Visual supports, you're providing the picture, you're providing cues, you're providing the written word, whatever you need to do to support the child. I would highly recommend going on one of Alison's courses yourself, because as she created the program, she really understands it and she has every answer to every question because she has lived it, she has worked it as a speech therapist as well, and she can really help you integrate it into the classroom as well. But it's one of the best courses I've done in the last few years as well. So that was a really fast overview of colorful semantics. Again, that was Alison Bryan's program. And now we're moving on to the Derbyshire language scheme. I often say to new therapists, oh, do you ever use the Derbyshire language scheme? And they look at me and they say, what? But the Derbyshire language scheme is a system that has been around since the 80s. And it is based on the idea of information carrying words. And that is really important for me. It's an informal assessment I use all the time to see if the child can understand these information carrying words, because you need to understand these to carry out an instruction. And sometimes we're very quick to give instructions and not really think about what type of command we're giving, what type of information we're providing to the child. So when you use the Derbyshire language scheme, it gives you a very much graded approach and structured approach to the scheme. So this is what information carrying words look like. And I do use them a lot in groups as well and talk to parents about them. So if you're giving an instruction, for example, and you have one toy out in front of a child and you say, or you might have one object in front of your student and you say, give me that. They have no option but to give you something. It's out of context. You know, they can give it to you. If you're working on the principle of one ICW, one information carrying word, and you were told by the speech therapist as a teacher or an SNA or a parent, you know, your child really is following one word phrase or a short phrase. How do I do that? So you're only going to do a one word phrase or a one information carrying word phrase. So there might be a few things on the table, like you see there, scissors, pencil, or paper, and you might say, pass me the scissors. And they have to identify the correct object. They have to listen to the instruction and identify the correct object. And then we would say they're following a one information carrying word instruction. If the child is following a two information carrying words instruction, or an ICW, if I can keep it small, the length of my phrases, there are two words in the sentence that have to be understood. So, for example, you could be doing a task with the child if they're in the junior cycle of school and you just amend it for the older, the senior cycle, just amend it. Put Teddy on the chair where there is a choice of a teddy or a dolly and a chair or a table. Um, and so you could obviously change that up when you're working with the older kids. But that is quite complex. That two information carrying word is quite complex. There's a lot of instruction to listen to. You have to figure out exactly the correct object between the teddy and the dolly and the chair and the table. And semantically speaking, they are very closely linked. So they really have to listen, but they also really have to understand the words as well. So at a 3 ICW level, here we go. It's getting harder. You're putting more difficult concepts into your sentence. So at a 3 keyword level, you can start to introduce concepts such as under and big, it says here. So look at the sentence. Put big cat in the car. So you are going to give the child a choice of a big cat or a small cat, a big dog and a small dog, a car and a boat. Now that is hard going. Obviously, when you're working on information carrying words, you're going to sign the words, you're going to repeat it, you're going to help them always at the start. But if you are informally assessing the child, that's a good way of doing it to test the information carrying words. And at the 4 information carrying word level, you can introduce colors, prepositions, like those difficult ones, the more low frequency prepositions. I always think they're the last to be taught that we would teach, so behind and next to. And they can be really tricky because they are quite abstract as well. So give Alice the big red brick with the choice of what frames you're going to use in this task, differentiate the colors. So you might be doing block task and having other objects there which are different in size. So that information carrying word template tells me a lot of information about the child when I'm working with them. So here are some requests then that we would use to see how people are getting on. Give me Dolly's cup, give me teacher's plate, give me, or put the biscuits on the table, put the blue tack in the drawer, give Teddy the big cup, make Dolly sit under the table, put your ball under the table, put the blue ball under the table, something like that. So you can differentiate again between the junior and senior cycle of the primary school class or into secondary school. So that's what a basic information carrying word is then if you're translating it onto a paper-based activity. All of these things are from twinkle.ie. And if you type in ICW, 1 ICW, 2 ICW, they have the corresponding sheets to work on. And they're actually really useful. I've used them in the clinic myself. There you have the 2 ICW one, and these again are all on Twinkle. And there you have one that can be useful to send home, color Teddy's nose red. You really have to think about that. This one really makes the child sit and think about it, because which leg, you have to look at the paw, is it the foot, is it the ear, is it the nose? They really have to listen to the information carrying word. That's getting more complex, the 4 information carrying word. We have a 5 information carrying word there. Can you see how much more complex that sentence is and how much the child has to really listen, or the student has to listen to the words? So obviously we can't do turn taking here, but for fun, have a look at these sentences yourselves and think about the color coding that's involved. So let's do the first one together. Let's start with the action word is running. So we know that is running is an action word. So yellow is what doing? What doing is running. So that's yellow. The boy, orange is who? Who is it? The boy. And so we would underline or color that orange, or we would pick a picture of the boy and then running. Again, from possible cues, having a choice, we would cue the child in and we would give them every support that they would need to get that done. So, in terms of narrative, this is one of my favorite things to do, and I love doing it. And I love doing it with my little groups that I have currently. And narrative not only helps to build language competence and it can help to generate um, the ability to tell a story or retell a story, but it also really supports conversational speech. It really does help conversational speech, and all across that educational spectrum, we can look at narrative as a key to really improving conversational speech. And again, it's termed as a bridge to literacy. So it's a nice way to move the oral language into the reading aspect as well. But I will never not do narrative. I always include it into either a group activity or one to one. And in the school, I think it's really important because you do focus on narrative. Um, I suppose at the senior end, you're doing a lot of oral language at the beginning, but then narrative really is broken down into different areas. But for me, it's again the key elements of who, what, where, when, and why. And using your colorful semantics again helps to build that too. So um, you're really building that strength. Again, cause and effect. When the woman opened the door of the oven, the gingerbread man jumped out. Oh my goodness, recognizing emotions. Oh, she was so cross because the naughty gingerbread man ran away. Does your granny ever get cross if you run away? You know, you can ask lots of questions. And then the first, next, and last. We tend to work on first, next, and last quite a bit for sequence. It really helps with temporal concepts, all of that. And then those lovely words that we would use in stories that are quite repetitive. Run, run as fast as you can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man. It's told over and over and over again, almost like a lyric of a song, really. And then becomes imprinted, and it's often the go-to phrase when the gingerbread man story appears. It really encourages expressive language skills as well. When you may not remember the story in its full form, but you're adding to it yourself and you're ad-libbing. It's lovely to hear what happens when the story is being retold from the child's perspective. And it does develop the children's storytelling skills. You'll see signing, you'll see pointing, you'll see it being acted out, sounds, environmental sounds, animal sounds being made. And then it develops into a nice little story. And remember as well, signed words are as significant or as important as a spoken words. They have the same weight. So I have taken some information from the Nuffield Early Language Information Program, and I have adapted a lot of my materials really to suit um, my groups. And I really find that their approach to early language development is absolutely fantastic, and that they would use a narrative, a scripted narrative. They would tell the story and then they would break it down into specific questions. They would revisit it daily. They talk about different emotions involved in the story, but the story is the main piece for quite a period of time. I also then have adapted the Jack and the Beanstalk story as well. That scripted story is taken home by parents, it's read at school, it's acted out, and it becomes really important that we work on it until the child has their version of the story, that they can retell the story. So I would do just a pre-measure of the story, maybe record them, quick recording of them with consent, and then re-record when we have come to a point where the story is being told in its completion by the child. So we a great way to support narrative skills, and particularly in the classroom, is to make a personal book. It's not only helping with sight word reading and the development of literacy skills, but it's really important to have a story based on maybe a holiday or Christmas or Easter time, anything like that. Again, narratives are so important because they can really develop language skills. And because you're reading the story repetitively, they are listening and they are learning it. And they're learning different verbs, they're learning different syntax, they're learning different structures. For the older student, then we would work on maybe different narratives as well, talking about where something is, who was involved in it, what were they trying to achieve, what was the problem, what did they have to do to get out of that problem, and what was the outcome at the end. And that story about the bus can be great fun because it can be quite personal. So Paddy, the bus driver, if it's the local bus driver, could be driving the bus, and you could get all of the children that are in the class named on the bus, and it could be to go to a match. And if there was a problem that, that there was a pothole, or there was there was a flood on the road, things that might have happened locally, can really be fun and to listen to, because then Tommy might have had to bring up his tractor, and there might have been a trailer, and all sorts of shenanigans could have occurred then. So it's really nice to get them to relate the story. If there is a story that has happened locally, it's really good to bring on a narrative around that too. If any of you have access to the Black Sheep Press, or you've been given it, or have old resources even there that you haven't looked at for years, the Black Sheep Press actually has a very decent narrative program to follow. It's quite extensive. It has pictures as well. They have nice colors in it now too. You can get online resources from the Black Sheep Press as well, and they can be used. I think they can be licensed for the school that you're working in also. So you can see there that they have the when, the describing words, the who, the action words, and everything. I do like Black Sheep Press. I think it's the fact that I trained when I was training, that's all we used. And when you use something to a point of ad nauseum, I go back to it every now and again. It's not my go-to, but that's not to say it isn't good. It was good enough then. Many therapists and teachers use it to this day. It's just it's all personal choice, but it is a really good, well thought out program, and it does start with the younger. It does have narrative structures for the younger kids, and it can work its way up in terms of complexity as well. In terms of phonological awareness, this is really important to highlight here. Phonics should be worked on with children with Down syndrome from the age of 3. And really, the big thing is phonics. When you come to blending, it can be quite difficult because of working memory. But there is a really good program called the Reading and Language Intervention Program that is run by Down Syndrome Education International. And Professor Sue Buckley provides training on this. It can be done online. There are go-to webinars that you use, and you have to just also get your training booklet too. But this advises you how to take a child who has been sight word reading and bring them along that literacy route where you're bringing in phonics and phonological awareness. I would start the phonics very early on. Again, I'm 0 to 6. I'm now working with the 0 to 6s, so I bring it in very, very early, and in line with so much of the literature that is out there. And those that say that children with Down syndrome will never read, only with sight word reading, that's not the case. But we do need to move kids on from the sight words, and the Reading and Language Intervention Program is the way to move them on if you're stuck. The best piece of advice that I have ever been given, or that has been given to me around children with Down syndrome and talking, is that making sure we talk to and with the child is really important, because oftentimes we are directing the child all of the time. And there is a lot of research to say that children within the school setting, don't practice talking because they're being told to do stuff. Now, I know in a busy classroom, it's easier said than done, but just checking in and waiting for a response, and giving children, again, time to process what you've asked them, time to prepare their statement or their sentence, giving them up to 30 seconds. Give them plenty of time. And while you're waiting for them to respond, keep a nice, open, happy face, a nice, pleasant face, nothing like you're like, oh, I need you to move on, hurry up, so that they know that it's worth waiting for and you're happy to wait for them. And being patient is a great way to do that. Okay, there is a great website called Language Through Play called Teach Me Too, and a speech and language therapist there called Laura has instructional videos on how to do ICWs, how to teach prepositions, how to do X, Y, and Z. Now, she does use Makaton, but you can absolutely apply the same principles using your law. But it's just the way she words things and the way she uses objects. It's actually really nice. There are instructional videos, there are instruction sheets as well. She's it's very well spaced out. She's really, really easy to follow as well. So it's nice to actually, when you sometimes are told you have to do this, you have to do this, and you have to do this. So you have to do prepositions, and you also have to do this concept and teach this. Your teacher, sometimes it can be overwhelming, the amount of things you're asked to do. So going to a site like this can actually show you what speech and language therapists do. Shape coding then is another program. It's more based on grammar And this is quite a complex program. It's another level up from colorful semantics. And it really, really is all about building up the grammar and having a color coding for your syntactic system. And it was developed by Susan Ebbels in Morehouse School. And she is amazing, and her programs are amazing. And again, if you have a child who's moving very quickly through things and you really want to support them visually and you'd like to really bring on their grammatical skills, shape coding would be another visual support for them to use. I'm flying through everything that you are probably you're all aware of anyways, and all of the things you have probably seen and used in the past. But core vocabulary for me is a great one to use with somebody whose speech may not be very intelligible. And you know that they have a lot to say, but sometimes it can be quite difficult to hear. Now, therapists use core vocabulary quite a bit, and they design an intervention program based around 50 words that they have asked parents or teachers to provide, that they will work on and try to get the best production of. So you might be encouraged to also, the therapist may say to you, please, if you do hear this word or this word, this is the core words we're working on, and this is the child's best production of the core word. It is a very useful intervention, and it is something that I would have used quite frequently in therapy, and I would have linked in with the schools around this as well. You can see how evidence-based this is. It's really targeted therapy where you're working on 10 words a week. You're breaking down the sounds, you're breaking down into syllables. You might be using speech signing, cued articulation to really drill the production. And again, it is an evidence-based program, and that it requires an SLT though to identify the speech sound difficulties, but then it can be remediated. You can support the remediation of these sounds if you're an SET or you have the time to do it. There is another approach called the cycles approach, where I would do this sometimes, again, for repetition, for working on sounds where children might be missing the front sound, the initial consonant, or the last consonant. They might be using ta for ka, so tar for car, those kind of things, and who may have very limited speech sound inventory, so very few consonants in their repertoire. So it looks like this. I would say for 2 minutes, up, 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 hop, 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 map, 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 ape, 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 nap, 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 pop, 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 pop. And those 2 minutes are the longest 2 minutes you'll ever put down, because the child or student is looking at you going, oh my goodness, what is she doing? But I'm using everything up, 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 up. I'm holding the card up by my mouth. I'm using sign. They're looking at me saying it. It's being drilled. They're hearing it repetitively. And then we would get the child to produce the sounds. So there's ones for syllables, for the first, the initial consonant. Moving on then, a big thing that I use in therapies, and I think it's really important to say as well, sometimes we are using law of signs all of the time, and we do forget that this is our biggest visual support as well. Our mouths are really important, and we can use cued signing or cued articulation, which in my experience does not confuse the child if they are also doing jolly phonics. It draws attention to the mouth, and it really gets them to watch the movement of the mouth as well. There is a brilliant tutorial which takes no time at all. It's called Sign with Steve, and he actually goes through each of the cued articulation sounds for each consonant and each vowel, each long vowel and each short vowel. It's a very interesting video, and it's really good. You'll see lots of songs for cued articulation. One of them, starting off with Ben's big boot, b b b, and it goes like that. So you can learn a song with the cued articulation as well. But as the student gets older, it's really handy if you're trying to get them to cue into a speech sound. And for example, I'm just going to use the ba now. Okay, it might be an S, it could be something else. But if they were saying, there was a balloon burst in the classroom, miss, and it could be the alloon. You could say, oh yeah, the balloon burst. Oh, what burst again? I couldn't hear you, sorry. The balloon. Oh yeah, okay. So you're signing them in, and sometimes that's enough to get or enough of the cue to get the sound going. Or it can be used when you're doing intensive speech work as well, or if you're using cards, or if you're just working again on a core vocab approach. It could be the baby, the new baby at home, or it could be, if you were doing a big one down here is super max. So it could be you are at Supermax the weekend or something like that. AAC devices are quite the thing, I suppose, now, and all of the research would show that they absolutely support language development. They do not stop a child from communicating or using their speech or language. In fact, you've got lovely systems at play here. You have a visual system, you're looking at something, auditory system, you're listening to the word as it's pressed. You have a sensory system that you're tactile. It's very tactile, you're pressing something. And then you have you have your own system of producing the word or the sound, if that's your want, or if that's what you can do, or you could be building up to it. So the TD Snap Core First is often used by CDNT teams. It just depends on the child. They would need to be assessed. It can be used on an iPad. The screen can be, the screen can be locked so that they can't go into anything else. The volume control can be used. You can reduce the number of symbols on the screen. And it can be very functional, and it can be very personalized as well. So the pictures of mommy and daddy, or there could be pictures of a family situation. There could be, it could be confirmation, community, it could be anything. It could be all of your favorite things, your books, your favorite clothes that you like to wear when you're going out, or it could be anything. But there could be stuff there, descriptions of, your medications. It could be anything. But this can be used as a means of supporting communication, where a child is very clever and very bright, has good functional comprehension, but cannot produce the words, or has reduced intelligibility in the sense that their speech isn't very clear. This can aid them and help them, while they're undergoing therapeutic intervention, while their systems are developing, whatever the case may be. It is a very useful tool to use. I sometimes on my phone, I use this visuals to go, this V2 go. It's really quick. So I might just have hello, goodbye, whatever it is. I'm good. I press and I'd say, oh, that was amazing. I feel great. I'm good. And I'll press the button. I might say, how are you? And they could point good or bad. It's really quick. It's just if I'm out and about and I meet somebody I know and I don't have access and they don't have their AC device, which they should have if they're using it, it should be everywhere. We should be modeling it. We should be using it well. There's the Prolo-Quo, which is a more complex one. And you often see children in primary school using the Prolo-Quo more, just depending again on their comprehension, their fine motor skills, and also, I suppose, their visual tracking. All of those things have to be accounted for when they're using it. That's a very basic one. That's using ASL though. But I sometimes use it just again for bright visuals there with the not, it's no. And again, it just depends. You can use highly complex ones or very simple ones, just depending. There again, that's another one there. A lot of these visuals are available online too. And then there is a program called the LAMP program. And this can give you if you want to work on your AAC device and you want to introduce vocabulary, this gives you core words that you can work on for the year, the curriculum. So you'll see level 1 there, and it works its way up. I've included a link for you there also with apps that you can use for your Android device. And also there is a clip on setting up the classroom as well, how to make it a communicative classroom. I suppose having all of those things would be important. If a child has hearing issues, we should be signing, making sure their hearing aid is okay, maybe bringing in a teacher for the deaf, getting supports from the teacher from the deaf, for the deaf, sorry, just to make sure that the child is getting all of the access or all of the resources that they need. This is just something else. I think it's very important that we are aware that some children do not have a lot of language. Maybe they could have very complex needs, and they may need very much a supportive environment in order to interact. So intensive interaction is something that we would use with children who have quite significant complex issues. And a lot of teachers in special schools would be aware of intensive interaction. And there is a nurse who would run intensive interaction training here in Ireland as well. If you want the information, just give me an email. and or send me an email. And I did the course and it was transformative, I have to say. And I use parts of it in my therapy all of the time, particularly around waiting and imitation and acknowledgement of the other person and creating an environment that somebody would like to be in. And they're the principles. This was designed by Nind and Hewitt, who are teachers, and it is all about the fundamentals of communication. And sometimes when we're setting goals, we are always thinking of, oh, they must have an ing in their sentence, or they have to have a 3-word sentence, or they must be using 2 of the colors of colorful semantics by the end of the year. Whereas this really, I think, takes it back to the most important aspects of communication. And as teachers, as we're setting goals, it can be really important to use something like this. One of the basic precepts of it is the individual likes to be with another person. And that is something important, that they are sociable, they like to be in the other person's company, they can give attention to another person, they are building their concentration, and they are developing shared attention. So if you're using it, materials, that they are enjoying looking at it like you are, and that they can sustain their attention for long enough. They are taking turns in exchanges of behavior, and that can be at any level. It can be very simple, passing one thing to each other, or it could be exchanging a whole diatribe, or it could be exchanging information about your day, whatever it is. Being able to regulate and control your arousal levels, just if you are quite low and you're not engaging or initiating, or it could be that you are quite vestibular and you find it very hard to control because of that vestibular impact. But having fun and being able to play as well is really nice to see. And again, more fundamentals, using and understanding eye contact and engaging and holding it. Now, this is not for everybody, and it's, other children may have difficulties where eye contact shouldn't even be discussed, and it may create issues for them. But for children with Down syndrome, encouraging eye contact so that they can look at you and see the visuals, your eyes, your mouth, your hands, whatever it is you're doing, and understanding facial expressions as well. And it's amazing to see how quickly that can come on. And again, physical contact, oh, can I give you a high five, fist pump, or whatever it is as it builds up as well. And even to the point where a child may have very good understanding and may need to develop their vocalizations. And you can use intensive interaction to do that through really meaningful imitation. But it's through that course that I learned so much about working with more complex needs as well. And there is somewhere to go as well, and to get advice on goal setting for children who may have more complex needs. Look at the spelling mistake on this. Isn't this horrendous? I apologize sincerely. The See and Learn program is something that I use all the time. Scattered here on my desk are cards that I have to prepare for tomorrow. They're everywhere, See and Learn cards. I use this as a resource. It's purely a resource, but you'll hear about it because it's an evidence-based resource for children with Down syndrome, and it's been developed for children with Down syndrome. I use it, believe it or not, from the age of 6 months onwards. We get the speech sounds in, and we work really hard to get the speech sounds in. We work on getting the children to discriminate the sounds, pick the sounds, and then produce the sounds. And we use this really as an early introduction to phonics, because they are looking at a picture. I just pull it, sorry, I just pull it to show you what it looks like. So you'd have a picture and you'd introduce it like this, R, 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 R. And then after a while, after you've inputted in all of the sounds, you would then see, can the child discriminate between them. So you'd have R, 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 and then you would hold up the cards and you would say R. The child can look at it, and that's enough for me because they're eye pointing. They can tap it, they can grab it, they can hold it, or they can show you. But if they're able to discriminate those sounds, it means they're hearing the sounds. So you can work on the sounds then. And then you can start building up the words. R, and you might do a j, large. Or if you're working on production or things like that, it's really good to work on, or combining sounds as well. So I would always work in speech sounds, and the speech sound cards are excellent to use. Again, we work on them from very early on. You can use them at any stage of the lifespan because we're always working on improving speech intelligibility. That's what cute articulation looks like. B, t, D. I love it. I absolutely love it. There you even have the vowel sounds there. Ah, and then you have your where you're hiding your thumb, and then a flat I. So it's really good. More vowel sounds. This is a good favorite of mine as well. Because if you have any hearing issues, S is extremely difficult to hear. And this shows you the sound and that it's a quieter sound than a Z. And we denote a voice sound with two fingers. Z. So T would be quite quiet. T, T, T. And D would be a harder sound. D, 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 or a voiced sound. And this is what they look like, all of these speech sound cards. B, D, E, H, M, N, O, U, or W, P, Y, and so on. And then you have your set 2 and you have your set 3. And what we do is we ask parents or teachers to input in the sounds on alternate days and to do it for around 20 sessions and make sure that the sounds are in. And then we get teachers or parents or SETs to help the child discriminate the sounds. So it's a nice program to work on because it's quite practical and it really encourages the discrimination of those speech sounds. So we work on then getting them to combine the sounds, building up the systems there you can see, and then moving on to saying words. So the See and Learn is really one of my go-to resources. It's just a resource. It's just part of the big toolkit that you would have. But again, I often run See and Learn training webinars, so keep an eye out on the Down Syndrome Ireland website for that information. And there you can see some of my other favorite things are exclamatory books. These early intervention books, again, you're building up, you can work on speech sounds. And if you are using your speech sound cards, that's great. And then you build it up into little storybooks. Again, you should be using personalized books, but they're really good ones to work on in the junior cycle of school. Obviously, you know, some of the older kids like them, the first, second, third class kids like these as well. You can see how you can adapt any story to suit your colorful semantic color strip. So you can see there that is from Teachers Pay Teachers. Again, other books with visuals are great. You'll see more and more. These are really good visuals as well for everyday things. If you're working with a child with maybe more medical needs who needs to tell you, look, I'm not able for this, stop, I need help, I'm all done with this, I need to go tell teacher, the child can identify what they need. Yes, no, I do use them, but I model it. We're going, yes, yeah, yeah, and see if the child wants to do that. Sometimes I think giving a yes, no can be dangerous because you're not really getting to the nub of the problem though. Yes, no is quite, again, it's a quick, easy fix for you, I think, or as a professional, I would say, oh, show me yes or no, we're going to do our work, yes or no. If they say no, what are you going to do? You know, just so sometimes they use it. It depends on the child as well. And that is a very quick whistle-stop tour of speech and language in the classroom. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will make the recording available for you. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.